Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new DataArt Healthcare and Life Sciences webinar. My name is Varvara, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Please excuse a little delay from our side. I had to switch to my phone. Today, we're going to talk about a very important, very interesting, but somewhat complex topic: the role of real-world data, RWD, in validating AI-driven medical devices. We're going to look at this topic from both a technological as well as regulatory perspective. I'm happy to welcome our speakers and my dear colleagues, Andre and Sarah. Hi, guys, and let's start with a short round of introductions. Sarah, you go first.
Hello, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Sara Jaworska, and I am Quality and Regulatory Affairs Manager at DataArt.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hello, I'm Andrei Sorokin. I'm Solution Architect in Healthcare and Life Sciences at DataArt.
Thank you, Andre. Before we move on, a little overview of what we're going to discuss today. AI-powered medical software is becoming more widespread and more sophisticated. Its development requires a unique approach to design, validation, and, of course, compliance. We will learn today that regulatory bodies like the FDA and the European Commission have already emphasized the role of real-world data as the key to validation of AI-driven software as a medical device. Today, we'll discuss challenges as well as best practices for leveraging RWD in this process. We're going to cover a couple of aspects: why RWD is crucial, what are the challenges around AI validation, what is the approach of regulatory bodies, as well as post-market development and ongoing regulatory compliance. But before we start, I would like to encourage our audience, please post your questions and comments in the comment section. It's very important to us. We will have a dedicated Q&A after the discussion, so feel free to ask questions. All right, let's get started. Andre, let's talk about clinical trials. It's known that traditional clinical trials are often limited in scope and may somewhat underrepresent the real-world patient population. How does real-world data help here?
Okay, I would rather start with that clinical trials, and you need some when you're developing something like a medical device. They rely on narrowly defined patient groups in highly controlled environments. And this is absolutely normal if you would like to achieve verifiable results. But on the other hand, this means that they might not cover all the different types of patients, of healthcare settings seen in real life. And clinical practice is much different. And it is based on also real-world data. And I refer to information gathered from routine clinical practice rather than the controlled experimental settings. We're talking about data collected from a wider range of patient demographics, healthcare settings, geographic areas, and for instance, during and after, of course, medical device development, AI solutions can be validated and refined using this previously unseen data, real-world data, to predict anomalies, adjust algorithms and solutions. And this, in fact, why we're doing this, right? It increases reliability and in the end improves patient safety.
All right, thank you. So, as we see now that real-world data helps make AI more robust, more effective, and ultimately more safe. But are there any risks around this data? If any, how can we avoid and manage them to make sure that AI remains safe? Sarah, that's a question for you.
Of course, AI models are only as good as the data they are trained on, and specifically in healthcare, data quality directly impacts patient safety. Inefficient AI-based medical devices may lead to misdiagnosis, delayed diagnosis, wrong treatment, or unequal access to healthcare, where bias is one of the biggest risks. If an AI model is trained on data that doesn't represent the full diversity of the patient population, it can produce results that are inaccurate or even harmful for the underrepresented groups. At the same time, models are dynamic and they keep evolving to some extent. Clinical practices evolve, patient populations shift, and if AI isn't continuously monitored, its performance can degrade over time. So that's why regulatory bodies like FDA and the European Commission enforce strict data management requirements for AI-powered medical devices. These rules, these laws aren't just checkboxes. They actually exist to protect the patients. So we continuously observe regulatory frameworks evolving over time, trying to follow technology.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Let's now move to the actual topic of validation of AI models using real-world data. AI in healthcare is different from other industries due to the very nature of the healthcare industry. Andre, what are the key challenges or maybe complexities in validating AI models in medical devices, in particular when using real-world data?
Yes, so first of all, I would like to emphasize the specifics of ground truth data, right? We are used to train in some computer vision models like for recognizing handwritten digits, right? And these data sets normally, when we're training this computer vision model, is unambiguous. You see image of 5, 6, 7 digits. You have a label that corresponds 5 is 5, 6 is 6, whatever. And this is very different in clinical practice. In fact, when we're talking about medical data sets that can be used for machine learning and training, we are talking, in fact, about differential diagnosis, because it's very hard to find two doctors that absolutely similarly classify the same specimen, for instance. And there's this immediately introduces a lot of technical issues, because we need to deliver these data like DICOM images, or maybe even some other kinds of data samples to our doctors. They will need to annotate these data sets. Then we will need, of course, before sharing patient data, we need to anonymize, clean this data, then send it back. When we're talking about geographically distributed patient cohorts, that means that we're dealing with cross-boundary data transfer. And yeah, this basically another level of complexity in data management, data ownership, and governance. I think that this is a good description from a technical perspective, but Sarah can talk more a little bit from regulatory.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. True. Sarah, and well, exactly what we would like you to mention. Andre said that one of the challenges is this cross-boundary data processing, collection, and transfer. Could you please explain this challenge from exactly the regulatory standpoint? How do we ensure that personal data is protected when we perform this kind of data transfer?
Of course, there are several things to that. But first, I would like to start presenting the first slide, if I may ask. Thank you. So when working with personal data across different countries, one of the biggest challenges is that regulations vary widely, and often companies would like to enter a couple of different markets. So GDPR in the EU and HIPAA in the US, for example, which are the most popular right now and most common regulations and markets, have completely different definitions of anonymized data. And that makes compliance tricky when operating in those markets. The best approach, in my opinion, is to plan from the start where this AI model would be used and base data governance on the strictest requirements. It will help in keeping compliance across multiple regions without needing double policies for each region. That doubles the effort, makes operations prone to error, and makes also very difficult to maintain this variety of documents, of procedures. So GDPR, for example, sets a very high standard for data protection. So aligning with it globally could simplify your operations. Another challenge is cross-border data transfer. It adds another layer of complexity, as Andrea mentioned. Regulations often limit how personal data can be shared between countries. And one of the things that we can do is to perform an assessment to consider where data could be transferred and if any additional controls should be implemented. For example, like additional regulatory permissions or additional security controls in the target place of the storage of the data. And the third important thing here is that privacy and security must be built into AI development from the very beginning. So this means, for example, secure architecture, minimizing data collected, documenting legitimate interest for the use of those data, and limiting access rights. New standards will soon provide more clarity, but companies that adopt a privacy-first approach now will be better prepared for the upcoming years.
Perfect, Sarah. Thank you for talking about data protection, data privacy protection. Let's stay with you for a while and talk about, well, in general, about the approach of the regulatory bodies such as FDA and the European Commission towards AI in medical devices and its validation. What's the current state?
As you can see, situation, at least when considering those two markets, European Union and FDA, is very interesting. The regulatory landscape for AI-based medical software is evolving, is rapidly changing, and we've seen new regulations coming into effect with even more still in the pipeline. And even additionally, recently, new guidelines have been finalized. So a lot of things is really happening. But at the same time, we can observe this gray area in the middle. Interestingly, additional organizations like TMNB or European Medicines Agency added their perspective on how AI models should be developed and should be controlled. In the case of EMEA, in the context of drug discovery and drug development. So it's very robust and we can use many different sources of the requirements unless we make sure that those requirements are not contradictory and are best for our case. On top of that, new AI-specific ISO standards are currently in development. We also have the new IMDRF guideline on good machine learning practices. And the last guideline describes very high-level principles for AI development. Just a small note that so far the FDA has already cleared hundreds of AI-powered medical devices. Still, we do not have such data for EU because UTMET database is not operating in this extent. But the experience that regulatory bodies gained so far contributed to shaping the new requirements.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a great overview. Just want to let our audience know that we will be able to share, all the links as well as the presentation after the webinar. Let us know if you're interested. Sarah, in the light of so many different regulations, especially new ones and the gray zone ones, how can organizations comply with these regulations successfully?
Mm. Well, as always, when talking about medical devices, we need to consider two aspects. The first one is product requirements, and the second one is systemic requirements. And when talking about the product, there is a bunch of documents to generate. Starting point should be drafting the intended use of the medical device. That will define then what needs to be validated, how reliable the model must be, and in what clinical context it will be applied. Once this is clear, companies can structure their verification, validation, and risk management plans. And the key part of this is ensuring that AI models are trained and tested using diverse, high-quality data sets. Regulators expect very detailed data-related documentation that would cover data sources, pre-processing steps, data labeling, and validation results to prove that the model is really efficient and fit for purpose. Another requirement related to product documentation, by the way, it is only specific right now for the FDA, is the predetermined change control plan. It documents frames in which the model can operate and can change. It includes impact assessment, outline of risks related, and how changes will be validated. When thinking about this system, of course, we still need to comply with the regular quality requirements, like the requirements of ISO 13485, the QMSR, risk management, etc. Additionally, we need to make sure there are proper security measures in place. And on top of that, good machine learning practices should be implemented and followed. They can be either implemented as part of the internal QMS or required from the vendor, depending on the business setup. And slowly we're heading to the GMLP. In my opinion, one of the most significant role here is human oversight. For example, the AI Act requires to have a functionality of a stop button. So it doesn't have to be literally a stop button, but basically humans need to be able to shut the system down fairly easily. Another one is that training data sets must be independent of test sets. And what already has been said, cybersecurity controls, implementation, and making sure the model reflects the intended use of the device. So as long as companies would follow the regulatory requirements, both systemics and product-related, and take the effort to validate AI models thoroughly, they should be able to ensure patient safety and bring their products to the market.
Thank you, Sarah. Great overview. And they bring their product to the market. Let's talk about post-market. Andre, as Sarah mentioned, AI regulations evolve constantly. So does AI. When the AI-driven medical device is already on the market, how can we monitor and improve this product post-market?
Okay, I would try to sum up this with some technical answers. In fact, developing medical device, establishing metrics, writing these documents, this doesn't stop the evolution of a medical device. I mean, of course, we might want to talk about device with, I don't know, just frozen machine learning weights that will never change. But we would like to discuss, I believe, more dynamic machine learning systems. And as Sarah mentioned, the ongoing evolution is anchored by a PCCP, Predetermined Change Control Plan, which sets out how an AI model may be refined over the time without requiring repeated submissions, resubmissions of the and recertifications of the device. And maybe I'm a little bit oversimplifying this, but I personally would like to outline 3 major cases when we cannot go without resubmitting. So one is basically new data sources or maybe new modality, meaning that, for instance, we worked with X-ray images and we would like to switch to other modality like CT or MRI. Significant change of algorithm. And for instance, you might have used, I don't know, just convolutional neural network, CNNs, as an algorithm for skin lesion classification. And then you decided to move on to visual transformers. And this is significant change. And this potentially requires recertification in this case. And of course, the third option is basically when there's new data coming from clinical trials for other research revealing safety or performance concerns. And unfortunately, this means that you will need to rework your medical device and your approach. And I mean, the solution space is extremely vast, and even the most robustly tested models in clinical trial settings, they will definitely in real world experience unexpected edge cases, anomalies, inputs. And that means that we need to collect and analyze these edge cases coming in. And that means that this practice should be established very early, even before going post-market. These pipelines that will track the model drift, the new data coming in. And another thing is that we can rely, of course, on human feedback, and this is invaluable. I mean, just this input from real human beings, real doctors. And other thing, we might want to, I mean, depending on the task, we might cross-correlate our data with data coming from other wearable devices, maybe from some biosamples that basically could be used to enhance our data sets and reveal where our model is underperforming. And from practical standpoint, that means that we will need to create real-world performance monitoring practice, whether it is based on cloud technologies, on premises, basically tracking this model drift within the performance metrics. And another thing is that there's a threshold set in the PCCP plan, and you need to operate within this threshold, right? If you go out of this metrics thresholds that you established and something is not described in model evolution plan, then you will again need to recertify. But if you can, using the same model, enhance data set, improve your performance by 1-2%, I don't know, just then it's a way to go. This is what you would like to do potentially to improve the overall performance and metrics of your solution. I think that this pretty much sums up the technical part. But I mean, Sarah will tell more about the legal aspects of this.
We look at this from both technical and regulatory. So this was the technical part of how you can improve your product post-market. Now, Sarah, from the regulatory standpoint, how can companies ensure that their AI updates don't violate the initial certification of the product, when we're talking about post.
Yes. So in this case, we need to use our predetermined change control plan. This is why this document is actually so important. It should clearly outline what changes are acceptable, what changes would not be acceptable, And if a model changes in ways not covered by the PCCP, then a new regulatory submission is likely required. When Andrei discussed about the technicalities of the possible changes of the model, however, from regulatory perspective, you will know about if the change is significant or not, basically from your risk management. So whenever you're performing the post-market surveillance and you can see some, when you perform some trend analysis or you can observe some new risks coming or some drop in the performance, these are the factors that should really pay your attention. And to get this knowledge about the shift of a model, manufacturers need to have a proactive post-market surveillance process in place. PMS requirements differ between EU and US. However, specifically for AI-powered medical devices, but they have some common elements, like, for example, continuous monitoring, risk detection, real-time data analysis. And AI developers, legal manufacturers need to integrate these elements into their regulatory quality strategy and processes. And this is practically the only way to ensure the ongoing performance assessment and risk management. Regulators pay really close attention to the adaptive AIs as they are the most innovative. Regulators are still learning about the AI-driven medical devices and so on, so on. And companies that build strong PMS frameworks will be best positioned to maintain their compliance and patient safety.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. And so far, we covered all our topics that we planned for you for today. Thank you, guys, for all these great insights. Before we move to the Q&A session, Sarah, Andrei, could you please maybe briefly recommend something to our audience, especially for those of our listeners who are involved in development of AI-based software as a medical device? Sarah, maybe you. Sarah, you're muted.
Sorry. From my perspective, validating AI in healthcare is very, very complex. For years, there were no clear regulations. Any regulations were only available in draft forms, draft guidances, and companies were relying on them as best as they could. But now, final versions are being published, and often these final versions have implemented significant changes. So this is why I believe it's very necessary to work with experienced professionals that are up to date with all of the requirements related to medical field, but also cybersecurity and privacy. So if I could give any final thoughts, is exactly that. When looking for a vendor, please pay attention to the competencies in all of those three areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Andrei.
I can hardly add anything to this, except that basically if you're working with real world data, you need established data management, data governance practices, well-defined security measures that you validate continuously. Also monitoring of your models, of your solution, adjusting them in accordance with the real world data. And basically this requires expertise, domain knowledge, and this is very essential to manage changing regulations and technology because they go side by side. So yeah, this is very important.
Thank you. On this note, let's take a look at the questions. So we have several that our team collected during our preparation to the webinar. And question number one, Sarah, that's possibly for you, what are the types of applicable submissions for AI in USA?
Thank you for this question. In the US, AI-based medical device can be introduced to the market via 510K, special 510K if that's another generation, and if this device is of higher class, then PMA route to the market would apply, where the last route would be de novo. And as far as I understand, those are the only 4 pathways that can bring AI models to the market.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. The next one is, let's pick one for Andre, and I hope I will pick it up correctly. How do we ensure continuous monitoring of AI performance?
Okay, basically, depending on whether you're using on-premises or cloud-based technology, you need to establish an algorithm and a practice how we can adjust, append data to our data set, how we can prevent basically, of course, leak between training and test data, but at the same time, monitor the metrics and the performance basically declared initially in your PCCP plan or during clinical trials. Maybe you will have even more metrics. Basically establishing this pipeline, something like just ML monitoring in Asia or in AWS. Or creating scripts for your ML flow pipelines.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know that we will, of course, sum up all the highlights of the webinar and share it with the audience. Another question is, Sarah, this validation of AI, who does it apply to? What are the so-called use cases?
Okay, so when we are talking about such a robust topic as AI regulations in medical field, we need to consider that there are different laws and different guidances that apply, and all of them enlist different economic actors, like, for example, AI Act versus FDA Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act and MDR in Europe. They have a list of all of different economic companies that play different roles, but we wanted to focus on legal manufacturers because these are the companies that have the biggest, the highest liability and regulatory burden. So yes, it doesn't really matter if a legal manufacturer would like to develop their own AI model by a black box or outsource this development to a vendor. Still, he poses the responsibility.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And we have one more question, and that's for Andre. What strategies do you use to scale data ingestion pipelines for real-world data? Andre.
Yes, so it depends. I mean, if we're talking about huge chunks of already accumulated data, then it's one engineering task, basically how we can move, I don't know, just petabytes of data for processing to the cloud, for instance. And another thing which also depends in our modern world very much on scalable, elastic infrastructure is basically getting real-time events like data from wearable devices, your smartwatches, for instance, or even hundreds of thousands of medical devices in real time. This normally requires cloud infrastructure because otherwise it is very hard to build this in-house because This is again an issue of scalability, and we can integrate no matter of the cloud provider. We can integrate monitoring practices, meaning that we can take the latest data. We can use the prediction algorithm to identify anomalies, for instance. And just to give you a concrete, more specific example, you can measure heart rate, you can measure blood pressure, you can alert if something is going wrong. You were expecting some kind of experience, if the user experiences some kind of anomaly reaction to a drug, maybe, or during the day. So we can basically register this event in real time, and it was not possible before. Just these huge infrastructures that can be deployed in the cloud. So that's pretty much it about these services.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrei. There are no questions, so I think we're ready to wrap up for today. I would like to thank our audience, our listeners who managed to join today for your attention. And also thank you, Sarah, thank you, Andrei, for the great insights that you provided today. Stay tuned for the upcoming webinars from Healthcare and Life Sciences DataArt team. Have a great evening and goodbye.